Bam. Worked like a charm.
I I always like the my lighting's going to be messed up today again too, I think, but I always enjoy the applause there. It makes me feel like almost a real celebrity. we we have rolled around once again to a podcast. We've had some technical difficulties with some podcasts, so we apologize that the last couple of weeks for things. Hopefully we've got that worked out with our streaming platform. So yeah,
three or four times to tried rolling with this thing, and I don't know. I don't understand. We've changed nothing. We've done nothing different than what we've done before. But I don't know. It's not like.
I would just like to say for the record, what you just said. We've changed nothing. No setting has been changed. Nothing has been altered in any way, shape, or form. Yet you come back, turn the computer on. Shit does not work.
Yeah, it's wild.
I wonder. Let's see. Let's go back. Let's trace back. What is different as it relates to technology nowadays? Oh, it's Skynet. How could I forget? How could I forget? Do we think that's coincidental? Do we really believe in coincidences like that? I just say I don't. I don't know. Some people might, but I don't. Just me.
Yeah, I just think it's probably poor planning on their part.
Oh, yes.
They do all these different upgrades, and maybe they just don't test to make sure it's going to be non-affecting to current customers. And if it were, you should probably let us know something about that. We could work around it. It'd be a simple fix, but
yes.
Who knows what's going on, man.
Well, and my favorite thing too is whenever you try to get help with anything, let's say, especially with any kind of social media platform like Facebook or X or whatever, like you can't actually speak to anybody. You can't have a chat with anybody about, some kind of technical difficulty that you're having, right? You got to send in a form. First of all, they hide the information from you that like you can't even figure out who to talk to when you have an issue. Like I'm sure that's not intentional, right? But even then, right? You're still just talking to Skynet. So yeah, good luck with that. Skynet's causing your problem, but let's talk to Skynet about fixing the problem if you can. Yeah, so that seems good.
Yeah, we're
I had a system working here.
I don't know, man. I think it's I hate to say it's a lost cause, but I think this is just the new norm. This is just we're all just going to walk around if we choose to use this technology, we're just plan on a life of constantly chasing your tail trying to fix things, and I don't know. I just think we need to go back to like simpler times. I'm convinced of it.
I am so glad you mentioned that because I just want to give a plug real quick because I'm 2 weeks back now from Alaska, the Alaskan adventure. And if anybody wants to unplug from the grid and get back to a simpler life, I cannot recommend Alaska enough. Holy shit. It was way better in person than I thought it was going to be. From a landscape, nature, splendor, like, I mean, I knew it would be great, but it was better than great. Like, it was outstanding.
Awesome.
Highly recommend. Anybody that is, and a lot of people have Alaska on the list. Well, we'll get up there someday. Nope. Plan the trip. Get up there. I'm telling you, it is worth the expense to get up there.
Yep, you've convinced me. We got to make that happen. Only problem is I've only got 4 months out of the year really that it's kind of bearable up there. So, well, if you don't mind cold weather, I don't mind cold weather, but maybe not that kind of cold, but yeah. So the 4 months where the everything's green and everything.
Yes, it was good. Now, all that said, with our soapboxes, our commiserating together, so plug for real life, right? Going back to real life, not in the not in the Matrix, and brings us to today's podcast. Getting back to real estate, getting back to our Sub2 Empire roots, Mr. Kaufman. What is on tap for today's podcast?
All right, today we are going to address the most common seller objection that that I think you're going to see out there. And I guess if we just kind of set the stage for this, and I'm going to approach this from kind of a newer investor or a new, new investor's standpoint that's just getting into, possibly just getting into doing subject to deals. Um, and I'm doing this because I experienced this exact same thing, and I experienced it over and over and over again. And that is, you've done all this marketing, you go out, you're finally at the kitchen table with these folks, and you're sitting down, you're realizing that uh, potentially that maybe, I don't know, maybe the scenario is that you're making multiple offers, but we always make a creative offer on a property, always. So we'll make a cash offer, we'll make a creative offer, maybe even a couple creative offers. And one of those creative offers is almost always a subject to offer. And the big issue comes in when you hear these famous words, the objection of after you've explained what subject to is, you're going to hear, "You mean my name is going to stay on the loan?" That is the question. I mean, you get that question more times than any other question as it relates to a subject to deal. That is the number one. Uh, I say question; it's really an objection. That when someone questions you, well, all questions, right, or most questions anyway, are objections. Um, and But that is number one. That is the primary objection that you're going to get. And so we're going to talk a little bit today um, about how to deal with that, and um, maybe give you some ideas on how to present that to a seller, because it can be a very scary thing, and for most sellers it's totally unheard of. Most of them have never ever been approached about something like that, about them basically you know letting you make payments on their loan. And so it's very uncommon in the non-real estate world. So that's what we're going to talk about. It's kind of a long-winded way of getting to the topic, I know, but um, yeah, it can be a very touchy subject.
And I'd just like to point out too, there are other seller objections that we've talked about in different podcasts too. But as you mentioned, this is the most common one. Let me rephrase that. It's probably the biggest fear that the seller has about, okay, my loan is you're promising to make payments, but my name's staying on the loan. Like, I don't really want any, like, I'm already, typically the seller could be in arrears, right? They stop making payments and they're in an issue, not all the time, but like they're in some kind of financial difficulty, and they don't want their name to stay on the loan, right? So we thought we would just take a dive into this particular one in a little more detail, get back to some sub two roots. And I would just like to say that here in the state of Missouri, we're just going to tie this real quick. There's a new law going into effect in the state of Missouri as it relates to wholesaling. It takes effect August 28th, 2026. And there is a 14-day, it requires a 14-day window for a wholesaler before they can enter into an actual written agreement with the seller. There's a 14-day waiting period if you plan to assign the contract. This is for assignments of contracts. And so I would just like to say, I'm only referencing that because I think it brings a better opportunity for you to do subject to deals, at least here in Missouri too. Like, be direct sellers. There's no 14-day window, right? Holding period. You're not assigning the contract, all those sorts of things. So it's an excellent opportunity for you to ramp that up. And if you don't have subject to tools in your toolbox, you should do that, especially here in Missouri, I think. I think there's going to be a window of opportunity here where we could potentially have have more of an upside on those cash offers, right? Because there's a 14-day window. Now, I'm sure there'll be a lot of creative things to get around that, right? Like, you can do an A to B to C closing and all, right? But the wholesalers are going to have to pivot and we were talking about this before we came on. Hopefully, this will eliminate some of those dumbass wholesalers that are trying to wholesale properties in St. Louis, Missouri from Guatemala. So will hopefully, and that happens too. By the way, like maybe not Guatemala, but there are out of country people doing that. I assure you that's the case because there's no possible way that could be true otherwise from some that I've seen. So just
Yeah,
letting you know, tossing it out there, tools in the toolbox.
could not agree with you more. It's the really it's the perfect opportunity uh, to start learning to kind of build your subject to chops, as they say. Yeah. I also wanted to bring up. You mentioned before talking about sellers and that objection and how much of just I had said at the beginning that it's something that they've never heard of before. In most cases, most of them have just they're like it's when you present it to them, it's the biggest hurdle that they could ever overcome, by agreeing to something like that. But I also want to mention that this is on the investor side. If you've not done this before, it is a huge hurdle for an investor as well
Mm.
to try and explain that, or to try and trying to put it into terms that justify that kind of justify the offer of taking over someone's payments. It's a in both aspects, and from the seller's perspective, from the investor or the buyer's perspective, it really is kind of a mental uh, psychological game that not a game. I don't want to say game, but it's just really a psychological type of thing you got to overcome, and you can definitely overcome it with just repetitive, making sure that you're presenting these offers time and time and time again. But I just wanted to point that out because it's not just kind of a shock to the system for the seller. It's also, especially for newer investors, it can be something that if you're left standing there kind of dumbfounded, you don't really know what to say or how to answer that question. That's it could be does have the potential to prevent you from making those offers in the future. But if you get your 10,000 hours in, as they say, and you do this over and over, it becomes pretty standard, pretty easy. So anyway,
I like to say just you say that a lot. The 10,000 hours. We'll bring that up around like to become an expert, you need to spend 10,000 hours on something too. That's 5 years. There's about 2,000 working hours in a year, Monday through Friday, 40 hours. There's roughly 2,000. Was it 2,040 hours in a year? So, I mean, that's roughly 5 years to get good at this stuff. So, just to give you an idea of when you become quote unquote the expert. So, I've been doing it 25 years, not every little nuance, but just real estate investing for 25 years. So, like, you pick up a lot of stuff over time, right? So, yeah.
yeah. Well, since we're talking about the psychology of it all, I think we just start there. We just start with uh, let's start with the investor perspective of this. Like we said in the very beginning, you've done your marketing, you've done everything that you need to do to get in front of these folks, and then the time comes. The time comes. You're sitting at the table, and perhaps you realize that subject to is the only way that you can. Maybe the numbers are just not working out, and subject to is the only way that you can see getting this deal done. That I think that scenario probably makes broaching this subject a little bit easier, because that's the only way that it can get done. Otherwise, the alternatives are going to happen. If they're behind on payments or something like that, they're going to lose their house, type of thing. So that subject to is the only option that you might have. That does make things a little bit easier. However, if there are other options, it becomes a little more difficult to kind of justify this offer, this subject to offer. And so, I think from more from the psychological aspect of this is something that um, that you need to be prepared for. And when you get that question of, you mean, the question is, you mean this loan's going to stay in my name? And the very first thing I'll tell you, I think that you must always be truthful and honest with these
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah. 100%.
It is, they will appreciate it, and I'm telling you, because I've, whenever I've come across this, or had this objection brought up to me, you kind of stammer. If you stammer and stutter, and you just don't have, you're just not comfortable with it, they're going to see it right away anyway. So the very best thing you can do is to be completely honest, both in your thinking and in your words, and how you convey it to the seller. It's just the best option. Just be honest with them.
Yep. And you have to lean into it. So first of all, like you mentioned, you need to expect this question or
Yes.
some variation of that. That's just about like, I don't want my name to stay on it, on the loan, right? I'm already in financial distress. Like I don't want to have this loan in there. Okay.
Mhm.
So you have to lean into it and say, I'm so glad you asked me that question, because I want to, like, let's walk through that. Right. And that's what we're going to do here on the call. Is like, let's walk through that. First of all, let's start. And there's no necessarily any particular order to this. Like we'll just call them the bullet points. We're going to go over here too, but let's start with the idea. Again, most people that are amenable to subject to are in financial distress somehow. They've already missed payments. There's already arrears. The house could potentially be going into foreclosure, whatever that is. Right? They're now motivated. Right? These people are motivated. So the first thing, or one of the items to make sure you mention, one of the bullet points for you is, I am, as the investor, the real estate investor, I am investing money into the deal. Yes, I'm taking over your payments. So I'm going to have the obligation of your monthly payment. Just for round numbers, let's say it's $1,500 a month. I'm going to be making that $1,500 a month payment for you too. But you also have arrears in the amount of $18,000 that I'm going to make good at closing, right? And I have these closing costs. So I would not be a successful investor, right? I'm a for-profit business. I am not a non-for-profit business as a real estate investor. Like, I would not be a very good real estate investor if I put $20,000 to $25,000 of my own money into the deal just so that I could stop making your payments, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to lose that money. Just like you would ultimately be foreclosed on if that happened in a worst case scenario. I'm going to lose that money. That's not my business model, right? So I have skin in the game. It's the skin in the game, right?
Right.
So the skin in the game bullet point, we'll call it. That's you, because you're making it good. Now, not every time does it have arrears. They might still be amenable to the subject to. That doesn't necessarily have to be in arrears, but you're still going to be doing something. The property probably needs updates or repairs that are even if it's in good shape, $5,000 or $10,000 to do what you need to do. So you're going to be spending money on that. Be honest about the money you're going to spend. Just say, this is what I'm going to put into it, and so I don't want to lose that money either by stopping payments and having it foreclosed.
Yeah. And, a lot of times what I'll tell them, and it's the truth, is that, I realize this is not ideal. This is not an ideal situation for either of us, really. I mean, on the from the seller's perspective, their name's staying on the loan, which is not ideal for them. It's just simply not. It's a very risky thing. But just like you're saying, hey, I'm willing to assume some risk by putting up whatever capital needs to be put into this deal to get it done. If you're willing to risk, take a chance, and let me start making these payments. Let me take over uh, this debt that you have. And it's just it's not something you want to be adversarial about. You don't want to be, well, hey, I'm going to be making your payments. I've got all this money. It's more of um, bringing them on, kind of on your team, and,
Yes.
and saying, hey, I understand this is not your ideal situation. We'd love to be able to cash you out, but maybe it doesn't make sense to do that, financially. And so, and that's what you'd say. But I can't do this. There's uh, there's too much at stake, and if I give you, this cash offer, well, that's going to put a huge burden of risk on me that I can't do as a business owner. So
Yep.
I know Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, this is not ideal. This is not easy to comprehend and understand and swallow, but this is one of the best options that you have, and here is why. And
Yep.
then we can kind of move into the next stage of this.
Yeah, but the skin in the game, like you're putting money up to make the deal work as the investor, and you explain why that's a risk to you. I think what you said there is like you have to make the seller understand you have risk as well, and so like it might not be totally at the same level of risk in the mind of the seller too. It's like what happens but I've got every incentive to make that payment, and I take that seriously.
Absolutely.
Like I have
Yeah.
every incentive to make that payment, and I take that seriously.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and the next one is like, well, good God, I like, how do I know you're going to make the payments? Like the proof. I just want to know, like, okay, I can agree to letting you make the payments. Like, I could probably agree to that, but how do I know you're doing that? Well, Mr. Kaufman, we have a solution for that. What is our solution to like, how do I know the payments are being made?
Yeah. This is why we recommend third party note servicing companies.
Yep. Yep.
This is something that you can set up with almost any servicing company, where your original borrower, the loan you're taking subject to, that borrower can have insights. They can have a read only, view only insight into those payments actually being made. And so, really, what it boils down to is you have a third party that's handling all this stuff. And so, if they want to ask you that question, versus just saying, well, I will make the payments, I promise I'll make the payments. If that's not good enough, we recommend a third party note servicing company, because now you've kind of removed yourself. You've kind of handed those duties off to a professional, and it's kind of a psychological thing for the seller, because now they know that those payments are being handled by someone who does this for a living versus just some guy some guy
Yep.
out here trying, that's promising to make his payments.
Yep.
And again, there's transparency there. They'll have their own login into the portal if they want to make sure that they're being made. Now, when I say a portal, I'm not talking about their bank portal, because all that information changes. So when you buy a property subject to, you're getting online access to make these payments, and I highly recommend that you do that.
For the sub two lender, you
For,
take
yeah,
control of the sub two lending portal. That's correct.
right,
Yeah.
right, and they don't have access to that any
Right.
longer, because they can't. Most of those portals are not set up for multi user access. Not only that, if you do give them access, there's a potential that they could change that information around in there,
Yeah.
and leave you kind of high and dry.
Yeah. Screw you over. Yeah.
But they
Can't.
do have transparency into the note servicing company that you hire to service this
Yeah.
subject to loan that you've taken over. So that's just one more aspect to it, I guess, of the security aspect for the seller that you can offer up. You don't
Yeah.
have to get a third party servicing company, but it's advisable that you do. We recommend that,
Yes.
that everybody does.
Especially because remember the sub two empire model. We're going to get a third party end buyer in there. We're going to acquire the property subject to. We're then going to do whatever we need to do with the property, right? Update it a little, whatever. Then we're going to put an end buyer in there, right? It's that end buyer that's also going to be part of that loan servicing piece, right? Because the money's all going to come from that end buyer that gets distributed out by the loan servicing. So it's especially important when you have that end buyer. But it may take you some time before you get that end buyer in there. So if there's there could be a 3, 4, 5 month lag before you like really need that loan servicing. It's fine. Like you can send them your payments, because remember, you took over the sub two lender portal. So you can go in there and send them the monthly statements that is being paid. You can send them receipt of payment. You
Yep.
can screenshot that. You can have a PDF. You can email that directly if you really want to. But the best way, so you don't have to worry about it anymore, is that loan servicing portal. But in the short term, you can certainly send proof of payment if that's what they want. And I can assure you, the first 2 or 3 months, that she's like, they'll be like, okay, they're making the payments. They just want to make sure
Yeah.
that that first payment, that second payment, like they don't need to see 36 consecutive payments. They just want to make sure it's being done because they don't know you, right? The trust isn't there when you're sitting in the kitchen table. So,
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
time.
I do want to also mention this this process accumulated over and over and over again. Um, this process will help you build. Uh, it can help you build, and you should be building one, a credibility kit, something that you can, evidence. You need evidence that this is what you do. This is the process. Here are the loan servicing companies that we use. Here's how many deals I've done like this. That type of stuff. It's just a good idea to have maybe a formal credibility kit here. If you're lacking in that area of your business, then start day one. Start building that credibility kit day one. And we've said this a million times, and I just have to repeat it. Just simply make the payment. Don't miss it.
Right, right. Don't say you're going to make a payment if you can't make the
Yeah,
payment.
don't
Like
do it.
don't do the deal if you can't make the monthly payment. Like
Yeah.
don't do that.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to repeat that story, but that's one lesson that I learned the hard way. I had a deal really early on, and I thought I picked this house up subject to, and I had the payment coming due. The payment was due. They give you the grace period there, so the payment was due on the 16th. It was really due on the 1st, but it had to be made by the 16th. Well, I ended up. I thought I would. I thought I'd be a wiseacre, and I had that house. I actually had that house sold and flipped, so that entire subject to loan was going to be paid off. Well, that closing was supposed to happen on a Friday the 13th, and um, literally at closing on that day, that buyer backed out on that day. Well, guess what? I didn't have set up. I didn't have a payment set up for the following Monday, the 16th, and I missed a payment. It's the very first and only payment I've ever missed on a subject to deal. And I am here to tell you, I haven't heard from this seller. I mean, this was over 10 years ago, and I haven't heard from this seller now. I guess in about a year. But so for 9 years, this seller has followed me around and really given me the business about missing that one single payment. And so I learned my lesson early on, and I absolutely will not miss a payment. And if it means that I don't do the deal, if I don't think that I can make that payment or whatever it is, I will not do that deal because it's that important, and it's you don't want these folks following you around. I promise you. You just want to just do what you say you're going to do.
Yes. And I'll go one further. Remember that sub two flip we did on Santiago? Remember
Mhm.
it closed on in the middle of the month on a Friday. Like I want to say it was 14th, March 14th. And again, the next payment on that subject to was due the 15th or the 16th or whatever. And it was going to be paid off by the title company. The loan in full, the subject to loan, was going to be paid off by the title company. Everything was signed and funded, right? I've verified everything was funded. Well, that title company, we had two different title companies. We had our title company as the seller, and the buyers had a different title company. The buyer's title company were the ones that were going to pay off the loan because that's where the funds came from. And so they did not send the wire to pay off until the 18th.
Mm.
And it messed up the loan. The loan went, it was technically past due and the title company finally admitted after I got onto them several times about this is not our fault. Like, you send the wire out. Why did you wait 4 days to send the wire out? It doesn't make any sense. And
Yeah.
they admitted they were wrong, and they reimbursed us for the extra fees that were charged to get the loan paid off.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, don't just, in other words, what we're saying is don't take that for granted. Don't even think a title company will do what they're supposed to do, especially when it's not your title company. Like, this wasn't our title company, this was the buyer's title company. So you got to stay on top of every aspect of that just in case.
That's true. Yep, for sure, man. That was one mistake that I will never make again.
Yeah, ruined you with that seller.
Yeah.
Ruined you with that seller for forever.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about, we've kind of talked a little bit about some of the psychological aspects of it, and
Yeah.
trying to build the confidence and having them understand that, like I said, this is not an ideal situation for you. I understand that. It's not necessarily. I mean, although it probably will work out, for me in my favor. But ideally, we want to have some credibility with these folks. And so one of the things that I like to do, especially for those people who maybe are behind on payments, and they've taken some dings to their credit. One of the things I like to remind them is that, as we are making payments, just because we caught the arrears up, just because we're putting in, like I think you mentioned, like $18,000, just because we put that $18,000 and paid up, made this mortgage current, doesn't mean that it's fixed your credit. In fact, I've been told, I don't know if this is necessarily 100% true, but I've been told that that's something that banks just don't care for. They don't care. They want to be made. They want it to be current. They want it to be back in the black. But if you were to immediately sell that house afterwards, you've stopped all opportunities for boosting your credit, for building your credit back up, and getting you back on track. And so that's one of the things that I like to bring up to these folks is, hey, if we go ahead and go through with this deal, you are going to see your credit is going to be reestablished, or has the potential to be reestablished, depending on how bad their credit is. But at least there will be a record of you making your payments on time.
Yep.
And that you could potentially use that, I guess, if you're looking for a place to rent, and you needed some, you could definitely put it on my shoulders. If you're looking for a place to rent or something, they see that you're making on time payments when they pull your credit. Well, that can only help you in the long run. So that's one of those items that I don't think that a seller really realizes the benefit of us doing this, and that is building, reestablishing a credit profile, and minimizing the damage that was created when they stopped making their payments.
Yep. And you would be surprised, like, from our experience with credit building people over the years, you'd be surprised how fast 12 to 24 months of on-time payments, and especially when that's your biggest piece of the pie from a payment perspective that you might be obligated for, how much that actually boosts your credit. Now, if you're not paying your credit, like if you have a bunch of credit card debt and you're not paying that too, like, I mean, there's only so much that will mitigate it, but it will certainly help your credit score out. And a lot of people don't even think about that, the credit building part. So the seller wants us to make payments to help their credit score ultimately, so that they can do what they want to do in the future. But a lot of times they don't think about that. They just say, well, I need to go out and get another loan for a new house, like in a year or two, but I can't do that if my name's on this. Okay. So this is where you got to be a little bit honest too, and just say, okay, there's $20,000 of arrears on the current note. Your credit is ruined. You are not going to get another loan for any house anywhere in the country in 12 or 24 months. Not going to happen.
It's going to be
right?
very hard.
So let's make sure we understand that. Like, you can soft sell that, but whatever, wrap that up in more nice language. But that's the reality of the situation. They don't comprehend that. They're just like, okay, I know for a year, maybe two, I got to be out of the game here or whatever. But a lot of people think like 3 to 6 months. No way, no how. Yeah, that's not happening.
Yeah.
So if by chance you repair your credit in 36 months, we're still making payments on this, whatever, you come to us if you're ready for a new loan. We'll give you a letter. We'll give you an affidavit letter saying that we are the responsible parties for the payments on this loan, which are in these people's name. We have agreed to make those payments. Here is the payment history that we have made. Please consider taking that off their debt to income ratio for qualification of a new loan.
Yeah.
Done that several times, haven't we?
Yeah.
So
There's
has been accepted every time.
Yeah. And there are more options, above and beyond the affidavit. The affidavit was kind of wild. We really didn't, it was just kind of an experiment in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
It was like,
yes, indeed. We're like, okay, let's give them this and see what happens. And it worked beautifully. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was because the requirement was the Fannie requirement. This happened to be a loan that we took over that was sold to Fannie, and I think the Fannie requirements were that you had to have proof, and I forgot the section. It's actually written in the Fannie underwriting documents, but it actually said you just need to have proof that you're not responsible for it's debt paid by others is what it is. You have to have proof that you're not responsible for paying that debt. And I thought about it for a second. I was like, well, what if we were sworn affiance in this, and basically just told them like we're responsible for that debt. And sure enough, we submitted it, and over again, we've had our sellers be able to take the affidavits that we've given them and are provided to their new lenders, and lo and behold, they're getting approved for loans.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it does work. I'm not saying it works 100% of the time, but and if it doesn't, there are multiple other ways that we can talk about reducing their DTI, which is ultimately that's the ultimate deciding factor in any loan. Really, it's you got to have a favorable debt to income ratio.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, there's other things we could talk about too. I think we're kind of getting a little bit off of it, but it's definitely the affidavit was a good thing. It was a good thing to come up with.
Yes. And so we talked. So just to summarize, we've got the main bullet points to alleviate the most common objection is like, so my name's staying on the loan, like, yeah. So we went through the skin in the game bullet point, right? You got to make sure third party servicing company bullet point, right? To make sure payments are being made on all sides, right? We're going to boost your credit talking point. Which also has a little dose of reality in it sometimes about what the current situation is about going to get a new loan in a new house like 12 months from now. So now where does that leave us? So it kind of leaves us and say, okay, I could probably live with that. You go in. I just like to know in our sub 2 documents, we actually have a document in there where we put in writing how serious we are about taking over your monthly payments. Now, could we still default? Of course, but that paper, again, psychologically, and we're very serious about it, right? Like we don't do a deal if we can't make that monthly payment. Like that's not how we operate. But we do have a document in there that says like we take our responsibility serious. We will assume and start the payments as of this date and blah blah blah. And it's just again a mental thing that we put in there. Again, that's just for the seller's benefit, doing a subject to deal. But going to then, so what happens then? This is all good and well, right, Mr. Kaufman? But here's my favorite. What happens if you get hit by a bus tomorrow? What happens?
Yeah.
Like, what? I wouldn't even know that as the seller. Obviously, the payments are not going to get paid sometime. Like, what happens in a worst case scenario, right? Like me as the buyer that's putting this deal together, right? We like to refer to ourselves as professional deal architects as it relates to subject to, right? When we're putting all this together, what happens though if something happens to us, the deal architect? Very legitimate, valid question.
Well, I would say, first of all, Um, First of all, this is where a good note servicing company comes in, because
Yeah.
you got to understand, in our model, and I understand this is not everybody's model. Everybody can, you can buy a property subject to and turn it into a rental. It's going to be a little bit different scenario than what we're doing. With what we're doing is, we pick it up subject to, we turn around and we sell or finance it, use an agreement for deed, or we'll wrap the underlying mortgage. So there's a couple of different things here. If your disposition is seller finance, if you are selling that property, if you're buying it subject to and then selling that property on seller finance, this is where a third party servicing company, a good one, comes into play. Because if you got hit by a bus the day after you signed this deal up and you found a buyer, if you got hit by a bus, your buyer is making payments to the note servicing company. They're not making payments to you. That note servicing company is then in turn dispersing that payment out to the appropriate parties. So it's making the underlying payment, the subject to payment. It's still paying your checking account or your savings account, whatever it is, and anybody else that needs to be paid. And so that's how we that's first of all, that's how we function on the seller finance dispo strategy. If it's a rental, and partial, I mean, how do I want to say this? If it's a rental, what I can tell you is that how you have your business set up, how you have your LLC set up, you should always, always, always have a beneficiary, or someone who is going to step in, a beneficiary in your operating agreement for your company. So if something were to happen to you, you have somebody that takes over your company, and you should have meetings with them. You should make them aware of everything that's going on. It should be somebody that you trust, but you've got to have your business set up correctly so that those payments continue to be made to that underlying mortgage. And the same holds true for the seller finance disposition side of it, with the only difference being that those payments are there's no hiccups. The payments go to the note servicing company. The note servicing company disperses the funds. Now you have, your LLC is going to own, or your company is going to own, or it's going to be receiving those funds, but you still need to have someone in your operating agreement um, that is going to take over, kind of take the reins, and um, either however you're going to manage after you're gone. Whatever's going to happen after you're gone needs to be taken care of in your operating agreement.
It can also toss out a secondary, yep, or even over the top of the LLC deal, which is exactly right. That's just estate planning, asset management too. But again, going back to one of our favorite tools, the trust, the land trust. So typically speaking, what we would do is we would acquire this property in a trust. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, set up a land trust to acquire this property. Sorry, a revocable trust here in the state of Missouri, which happens to own a piece of real estate, which by definition makes it a land trust. Right? So in the trust agreements, you are going to have, so your LLC will be the beneficiary of the trust in this particular case, right? You're going to have a successor beneficiary. So in the trust for a specific property by property. Now this is property by property, right? There's a succession plan in place as part of your trust agreement. And if you're not doing that, you need to be doing that.
Yes.
Right? You can always add it in after you set up the trust initially, but we like to do it all up front so that we don't miss any of those steps later, right? But also, then it falls also back to the LLC. You need to have somebody, as you mentioned, that can step in and make sure that the trains arrive on time with your 12 property portfolio or whatever it is in there too. But you can also have a mechanism for the individual property in the trust. Shit, you could even quit claim the beneficial interest back to, in the event of death, back to the original seller,
You
if
could.
that's what you wanted to have done. Now, somebody, the trustee, right, of the trust, you have to think about this a little bit. The trustee has to notify that person that this has happened, right? The trustee has to manage that. So you have to just make sure you have the logistics of your trust set up properly so that all that stuff will happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's multiple options. One of the other options, and this is again would be something that you'd want to be totally honest about. Worst case scenario, you're talking to your seller. Well, what's the worst case scenario if, for whatever reason you stop making payments, um, or something happens to you and you stop and payments aren't able to be made any longer. Um, One of those things that you can do is um, direct whoever is handling your estate, and you just be honest with them and say, hey, what we do is we'd give the property back to you. You get to keep all of the cash that we have into it. um, there's we would become essentially non-performing at that point. So any kind of uh, any capital we have in the property or anything like that, um, it would be sort of like a deed in lieu situation
It
where,
reverts back. Yep.
yeah, it reverts back to you. You keep all the benefits, and you keep any capital or any cash flow that comes from that. It's essentially like a deed in lieu is what it is.
Yep.
And not ideal, again, not ideal, but
Yeah, not what you want to do as the investor, but something you could do if
yeah,
if
worst
necessary.
case scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, the best case scenario in a situation like that is you have your estate set up so that your heirs. That's the whole point behind investing in real estate or investments. Period. So that your heirs reap the benefits of what you've built. I mean, it's kind of why we do these things, uh, partially anyway. Um, and so you would want to whoever you handed this off to, you would want them to be able to capitalize um, on what you've built, and so you'd want to keep those notes, those payments current, and all that good stuff. Um, but worst case scenario, they get the house back. That's the absolute worst case scenario.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, I think the best is what you just said. Just say, well, you need to understand the way I have my business set up. There's a person that would come into the business if something happened to me specifically, come in the business and make sure it keeps running.
that's right. Yep.
Like you say, well, okay, that's good for you to say, but you could be blowing smoke up my ass.
Right.
That's true. That could go back to your credibility kit. Like you could have a document in there about that. Again, you could do it untrust. You could do it twofold. You could have that in your LLC, as we mentioned, and still have a document in your trust that you could give to the seller.
Yeah.
Saying, okay, if something happens to me, the trust that owns this property, here's what's going to happen. And here you can just have that for your records if you want.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think just again, the total honesty across the board, because all of these questions are going to come up. Like everything that we just talked about, it's all going to come up, or it should come up. If it doesn't come up, you should be the one bringing this up as well.
100%.
It's just total transparency, total disclosure. Because I've said it a million times, but you're building a long-term relationship with an individual potentially here, and you just want no secrets whatsoever. You want everything out on the table. It's I'm telling you, it is the best thing to do. Don't hold anything back, and just be completely transparent with these folks.
Yep. And the last, I've been putting up our little plugs for the day. Our last plug for the day, like, just partner with us. It's down there on the screen. We can help you do that. We've successfully helped many a person do that, so we know it works and it can be done. So it's a little daunting though, especially as you mentioned, if you're a newer investor. Like you got to get the subject to in your toolbox, and it can be a little daunting and complicated, especially if you want to layer trust in as part of that process. But that's why you need to partner with somebody that's done it before and knows how to do it successfully. And hopefully, after the years, right after the last many a year we've been doing it, hopefully we know how to be successful.
That's right. All right, man. You got any parting words here?
Nope. Other than that, have a great week, and we will see you next time.
All right. Take care, guys.